Let's turn our attention now to the war in Ukraine and the ongoing fallout from that missile explosion in Poland. Yesterday, NATO, Poland, and the United States all said it was likely the missile that fell in a Polish village and killed 2 people came from Ukraine's air defense system. That assessment is being disputed by Ukraine's President Zelenskyy, who said he had, quote, no doubt that it was not a Ukrainian missile. It's a claim put to President Biden on his return to the White House from the G20 in Indonesia.
What's your reaction to President Zelenskyy saying that the missiles that landed in Poland were not Ukrainian?
That's not the evidence.
That's not the evidence. NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now to talk about this. Keir, it's good to see you. So President Zelenskyy is sticking to his claim that this was not a Ukrainian missile, despite what NATO is saying. So what's the latest on the investigation into this explosion? And is Ukraine likely to get access to the site, which it is asking for?
Yeah, it's a little bit awkward, isn't it, for Western leaders, for the White House and for Ukraine. This is a division in opinion, a division in outlook, and it's being made public. And that's not really what Western leaders or Ukraine want, because, of course, what they've tried to do is maintain a united front in respect of Russia. But look, President Zelenskyy is saying that his officials have told him that this was likely a Russian missile. He says it makes no sense for me not to trust them. I've gone through the war with them. He then says, a little bit cryptically, God forbid some missile debris killed these people and we have to apologize. But first, there needs to be an investigation. Again, it's a little bit awkward because effectively what the president of Ukraine is saying is that the Ukrainians want access to the site in Poland in order to confirm for themselves what the West is saying is true. They're supposed to be united. So it's difficult. And ultimately, there is some frustration, I have to say, among European leaders that Ukraine is taking this stance, because they do seem fairly convinced that this was a missile defense system, possibly an S-300 Soviet-made missile defense system used by the Ukrainians. And maybe that's part of the reason for the confusion, because, again, if it was Soviet-made but fired by the Ukrainians, you can see why people may make a misjudgment in the early stages.
Yeah, definitely confusing and complicated. And Keir, I do want to focus on what's happening inside Ukraine, because this morning there are reports of strikes in Odessa and Dnipro, among other places. So what exactly is going on?
Yeah, it's important to remember that this is a continuing wave of airstrikes by the Russians, and that is where President Biden and Western leaders are trying to put the focus, saying, look, what happened in Poland is not Ukraine's fault, even if it was a Ukrainian air defense system. So just, for example, the latest news that 4 have been killed and more than a dozen are wounded from drone and missile strikes around Ukraine. Ukrainian officials saying they shot down 2 cruise missiles and 5 Iranian-made drones. Now, that is an improving rate of success for the Ukrainians, and perhaps that is because that they have now been helped a little bit by Western-supplied air defences. Yeah, look, the picture is of a ongoing Russian offensive in the air over Ukraine, and perhaps, and it's been said already, perhaps what happened in Poland is somewhat inevitable when there's a war taking place right next door.
And you've broken down well what we're seeing on the ground. But on the diplomatic front, it looks like the Black Sea grain deal between Ukraine and Russia has been extended again. That matters because we know the war has impacted the world food supply and grain supply. So what can you tell us about that specifically?
Yeah, extended for another 120 days after the deal was in its 4th month. You know, this is a grain deal, a fertilizer deal, foodstuffs deal. It was days away from expiring. And what it means is that these essential foodstuffs can be exported through the Black Sea, which is, of course, part of the war zone, if you like, between Russia and Ukraine. It can be exported through there to places that are so important, like, for example, East Africa, where I was just a few weeks ago, where there is this expanding food crisis. The implications of having that blockade in the Black Sea reinstated would have been crippling, and it would have happened because, despite the fact that the Russians perhaps might not have fired on ships, the insurers who insure those ships can sail would likely have said, well, we're not going to insure them if there's a risk of a continuing conflict in that zone. So very, very important. A breakthrough. The West, the UN, Turkey, Russia, Ukraine, all involved in extending that.
Important analysis. Keir Simmons, thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.